Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. It's been 9 days since Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Indian government of being involved in the murder of a Khalistani terrorist, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, on Canadian soil. Since then, Trudeau and Canada have failed to provide any evidence to support the claim. Now, given the allegations were made so publicly, the expectation is that they'll also validate it publicly as well. While some statements from US authorities may seem to back Trudeau, there are no global powers that are taking sides, and they are unlikely to. But what this episode has done is shine a light on the separatist Khalistani movement in Canada and build pressure on these groups who are now in the public eye. So let me show you exactly what do I mean. A rally was conducted by pro-Khalistani protesters outside the Indian consulate in Vancouver and some other places. This was a rally that was being watched very keenly. Remember, this was called by Sikhs for Justice and its chief Pannu, who have been leading in hate speech against Indian Hindus in Canada, asking them to leave and painting a target on the back of Indian diplomats as well. So this is an event that was being watched because it was coming after Justin Trudeau's allegations against India, and a lot of the Khalistani sentiment and activity in Canada is now under a close watch. Now, these protesters, remember, have been demanding, in a toned-down version of their demands, that Indian missions in Canada be shut down. And questions have been rising on the Trudeau government on how and why they allow these actions and speech against India on its soil. Meanwhile, we are also learning that Sikh groups are actually unhappy with the ongoing tension between India and Canada. They're distancing themselves from the Khalistanis. They feel that they are losing their respect around the world because of the action of a few, which are these Khalistani sympathizers, secessionists and terrorists. They are losing respect due to the radical approach that has been taken by some groups and the fact that the leadership has been taken over in some cases by people who are involved in abuse. This is a major concern for the peace-loving Sikh community in Canada and globally. They also believe that Khalistani groups have no association with Guru Granth Sahib. Sikhs there say that never have they seen these Khalistani groups actually reciting from the Guru Granth Sahib. They are ashamed that Khalistani groups are disrespecting the Tiranga. This goes on at all of these Khalistani separatist marches, rallies, etc. that are called for outside of India. We have seen, of course, a Tiranga being pulled off by one of those Khalistanis at the London mission of the Indian government. They also claim that the image of the Sikhs around the world is being tarnished by these pro-Khalistani groups, because remember, in a lot of these localities where they are in large and lumber, they are known for bullying, they are known for gang-type activities, and in fact, Hardeep Singh Nijjar himself is suspected to have been killed in gang action, a murder whose blame Canadian President Justin Trudeau has now landed on us. So has Justin Trudeau landed himself in a soup where even its traditional brother partner USA cannot help beyond a point? Well, I spoke to Canadian foreign affairs expert Michael Bociurkiw, who certainly seems to feel so. He writes on CNN.com that it is hard to imagine any world leader wanting to share the foreign policy swarm in which the beleaguered Canadian Prime Minister currently finds himself. I spoke to Michael about this and more in an exclusive conversation. Here's more. Michael Bociurkiw, thanks a lot for speaking to CNN News18. You're a global affairs expert from Canada and also a senior fellow at the Atlanta Council. I want to begin by asking you, you've of course written for CNN.com. Would you say that it is fair to say that Justin Trudeau made a miscalculation in the manner in which he publicly accused India of Nijjar's killing, and that it could have a lot to do with his domestic situation, which is of, lowering popularity ratings, interference of China being discussed quite a bit there, and also poor economic, concerns. Do you think that this was both a miscalculation and also purely as a distraction for the domestic concerns?
Yeah, a bit of both. But on the first point, a miscalculation, I think a lot of us feel that the Trudeau government acted very prematurely, that it was almost amateur hour at the Prime Minister's office. Why go public with these very, very serious allegations if the investigation isn't concluded? Secondly, what also is a bit of a head scratcher is why, for heaven's sake, why expel a senior Indian diplomat, hence escalating this situation quite a bit? number one, when the investigation isn't completed, but number two, the Ukrainian community in Canada, which is quite sizable, has also been asking the Trudeau government to expel Russian diplomats since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Not one has been expelled since the start of the war of last year. Meanwhile, in Europe, several hundred have been expelled. So I don't know if we can call that a double standard, but it is a bit of a head scratcher. I think what has happened here, it is a debacle, fits into a pattern of the Trudeau government fumbling quite a bit, not only on foreign files, but also domestic ones. I think a lot of us are wondering why on earth they acted when they did, when they arrested Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver on a U.S. warrant, where that could have been handled elsewhere. And in return, Canada paid a very, very heavy price in terms of commercial relations, but also we had some Canadians falsely detained in China. Trudeau is not polling well right now. If an election were held today, he probably wouldn't be prime minister. So that has to do with a lot of the domestic issues, housing crisis, cost of living crisis, and also ethics scandals. He has racked quite a few up in his time. And also on the foreign front, just to wrap up, we haven't been doing well. We've cut assistance to many, many countries. We don't have the so-called megaphone that we once used to. And also, not long ago, Canada lost a very expensive and long bid to get one of those 2 rotating seats on the UN Security Council. So we were a middle power. I hope we stay that way, but it's not looking good right now.
You also mentioned that not only is this not a fight that Canada would like to pick with India, a growing power economically and the world's most populous country and the world's most populous democracy, but it's also come at a bad time. Could you elaborate on that? Why do you think it is both bad fight and bad timing?
Sure. On many fronts, it's bad timing because on one, Canada just unveiled a Indo-Pacific strategy, and India had a whole section in there. And part of the thrust of that strategy was to really jumpstart, accelerate our relations with India, because everyone realizes the potential, world's most populous nation, that sort of thing. The other thing that is happening, of course, is given India's ascendancy, Canada doesn't want to be left out of that. Of course, we did have pretty good commercial ties, students, especially tourism. But when all of these other countries are trying to expand their relationship with India, Canada could get left behind in the dust. So that's not great. I should mention this as well. We have to acknowledge that the investigation in terms of Canada is still ongoing, so we can't jump to conclusions. And I should also say that India, as I said, is on its ascendancy, but that along with that, it has to, of course, act as a responsible state and a responsible country. So God forbid that the Modi government did indeed order this assassination. That would be very, very grave. And I should mention that it would affect not only relationships with Canada, but with other major partners. So we hope that wasn't the case here.
Speaking of other major political powers, you also seem to suggest that Justin Trudeau has landed himself in a security swamp that no other big leader in the world would like to join him in. What do you make of how US and other countries could react? Is this a fight that Justin Trudeau has picked where the other powers, especially US, will not be willing to take sides?
Sure. Yeah, well, what I was speaking about is Canada is not punching above its weight the way it used to. We've been left out of, some recent major security deals, alliances, and Canada is not only our biggest trading partner, but our, of course, closest neighbor. We have the longest undefended border in the world. And usually both countries move in lockstep with each other. This is a case where that doesn't seem to be happening. So Canada, and especially Mr. Trudeau, may be feeling a little bit left out in the cold right now. And also, I don't think the UK or Australia really came to back him up. I did notice that, I believe it was yesterday, the US ambassador to Ottawa did come out and say that intelligence was shared. I think this was pressure on the US, or maybe they felt a little bit they needed to come to Canada's aid, throw Mr. Trudeau a bit of a lifeline to say that, yes, we were involved in the decision. But we all saw the images of Prime Minister Modi and President Biden in Delhi and elsewhere, and it's a very close relationship. I think when push comes to shove, the U.S. will, at the end of the day, prioritize its evolving relationship with India over Canada. That's just the reality of geopolitics that we have today.
In your sense, what is the feeling in Washington about Trudeau's public allegation? Did it catch the US administration also by surprise, even if they were sharing some intelligence behind the scenes? And in that sense, was it political immaturity to do it in the manner that he did?
Well, I have a feeling that Mr. Biden and Mr. Trudeau did discuss this at the G20 summit in Delhi, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mr. Biden urged caution on the part of Mr. Trudeau to move forward with this. But, I think, again, it's so many Canadians asking this, including our national newspaper, the Globe and Mail, is that Canadians deserve answers. You don't come out so publicly with these allegations and then say, oh, well, the investigation is still ongoing. And in the meantime, as everyone well knows by now, the relationship is deteriorating. It's sinking very, very fast. And of course, that has economic ramifications. I don't think India will feel it as much as Canada will. And what really makes me feel bad, to be honest with you, is these students who may not be able to come to Canada for the next while. That's very, very unfortunate. And it's also going to hurt Canadian educational institutions at a time when they need foreign students. So, look, at the end of the day, this is not a kind of burning foreign affairs file, which Mr. Trudeau would like on his desk. And one more point, I think there may be casualties. I mean, maybe Melanie Joly, the foreign affairs minister, who is handling this, it's in her department. Who knows? Maybe she will be a casualty of this, because that often happens in these crises. You don't perhaps take blame for yourself as a leader, but you get rid of others who have maybe done something wrong or didn't pay attention. That wouldn't be out of line of Mr. Trudeau's playbook.
Just overall, your sense on Indo-Canadian relationship. This is, by many accounts and by many experts' account, the worst that we have seen. Even though Khalistani separatism and movements based in Canada have been a sore point between India and Canada for 40 years now. Do you see this relationship balancing at all, or do you think we'll have to wait for a change of government in Canada to see any improvement, if there was to be?
I think what both capitals need to do is take a breather, take a pause, let things cool down a little bit, perhaps let the investigation take its pace, and then resume. I think the ties are very deep. We all hope this is a diplomatic irritant rather than a crisis. It now appears to be. But the other thing I think that needs to be realized not only in Delhi, but in Beijing and other major capitals, is that Canada really does prioritize freedom of expression, number one. But number two is we basically flung open our doors to immigration as a source of population growth because we aren't producing enough at home. And when you do that, people who are not vetted properly are bound to get in, and they're bound to bring their grievances or their campaigns or whatever to our soil. And I think every Canadian is supportive of freedom of expression. However, there is a line when it crosses, defacing monuments or attacking temples, hate speech, hate crimes. I think the Canadian government needs to reassure everyone that the authorities will act quickly on that.
And do you think that will happen now? Because as I said, this has been a sore point with India for quite many decades. They've given a lot of information in the past too. And, recently there's been hate speech against Hindu Indians in Canada. Yeah. There's also been, these posters attacking Indian diplomats. Now, that certainly doesn't fall under freedom of speech or freedom of protest that Justin Trudeau talked about. Right. One, why do you think the Khalistani element controls Justin Trudeau so much that he would almost take the relationship with India to please them, as is the allegation? And secondly, do you believe the Canadian government now needs to act or to be seen to be acting on them?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves or get into Mr. Trudeau's head, but look, if I could answer it this way, I know that, for example, the Ukrainian community in Canada, which is quite large, has been complaining about hate speech and defamation of monuments and that sort of the thing since Russia's full-scale invasion. And there's a feeling that the authorities have not acted quickly or seriously enough. And I've already mentioned that no Russian diplomats have been expelled. And you can't tell me that they aren't engaging in hate speech or distributing false information. So generally speaking, I think there needs to be more attention to these because we are becoming day by day a more diverse country. We had an incident, by the way, this past summer in Toronto, where two rival sides of the Eritrean community had quite a severe and violent tussle in a park during a festival, and the police had to move in. I think dialogue is very, very important. For example, there has been very successful dialogues here in the United States, in Canada, and elsewhere between the Ukrainian and Jewish communities. This has helped us understand each other. This allows for channels of communications when there are problems. So cooler heads need to prevail at the moment, but I think we will get over this. And the relationship, of course, is very, very important on a number of levels.
Michael, if I could just press on the issue of Justin Trudeau and his allied partners' links with Khalistani movement in Canada. There is almost a sense that his entire government has been hijacked by these elements, as small as they may be, because he's a minority government and then, lowering in popularity. Do you feel that there is any pressure on this government to kind of de-link themselves from secessionist movements that have often been known to be violent as well?
Again, I don't want to get into the details of it, but generally speaking, the Trudeau government is very vulnerable because it is a more minority government and it relies on the New Democratic Party for support in the House of Commons. So it wouldn't act, for example, very decisively sometimes on certain issues the way it might as a majority government would. So that's a big problem right now. But the other thing I can tell you is when I do listen to Canadian government ministers, they're assuring all of us that the investigation will be conducted fairly and thoroughly. They do assure us that hate speech, hate crimes won't be tolerated. And, look, at the end of the day, there will be an election within the next 2 years, and Canadians will make up their minds whether, they can take the government seriously on these pledges.
Could I ask you just for a parting shot before I let you go? Has this episode dented Justin Trudeau's image more, or has it helped him in any way? As you said, those are very strong words. This almost sounded like amateur hour at the Prime Minister's office.
Oh, it's definitely dented it. The way they just wrote out this information, the way it's already hurt our relationships with India. I think Canada has a bit of a credibility crisis at the moment. And, we are finding out that our relationship with the United States is possibly not as strong as we thought it would, that they didn't really come to full support of Canada, prioritizing their relationships with bigger countries over ours. I have to tell you, that is a very, very new chapter for any Canadian to swallow. This is not the Trump administration. This is the Biden administration we're talking about. So if anyone would have come to our aid, it would have been them. So we'll see. But again, if you take into account all of the other debacles that are happening outside of Canada's borders and domestically, he's not in very good shape. This is damaging material to him. I think they have to act very quickly to limit that damage any further.
All right. Michael Bociurkiw, thanks a lot for speaking to CNN News 18.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.